some of the greatest scientific minds who believe in God will say that science brought them to God, not that they believe in science despite their belief in God.
Finding Something Real podcast friend. This is your host, Janelle Wood, and I am so grateful to be back here today in part 2 with my very special co-host, Noelle, and our special guest, Xandra Grieme. Just the other day, we were having a great conversation. It was so great that I said, hey, we should do this again. They both agreed, which was awesome. So we're here again to chat about science and God. And before we jump into all of that, for those of you who weren't here last week hearing Noelle's story, we're going to play a real quick clip from that original conversation.
I guess if there were proof and there was like something that I kind of would like concretely understand about God, I think I would probably find a sense of security in knowing that somebody's looking out for me. Um, and I think that's awesome for people who are religious and do like believe that someone's looking out for them. Because that's awesome. That gives you hope, and it gives you the courage to keep going, to know that things are going to be all right. And I think that's great. Um, so yeah, if it was true, if there were a way to know, I think that'd be awesome, and I think I probably would benefit, as would everyone. But just we just don't know.
All right, Noelle, welcome back to the Finding Something Real podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be back. Happy to be here.
Yay. So as we're recording this, it is, Valentine's Day, and you're on your college campus. And do you have any fun plans for today or anything that you're doing this week that's special?
This was my fun plan today, I think.
Hey.
Yeah, I dropped off some cards for my buddies earlier today. But that was the extent of the Valentine's Day festivities.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, they loved them. So
Now,
cute.
question for you. Have you told any of your friends that you're on this podcast?
I have.
Okay, tell me about those conversations. I'm curious what you've told your friends.
I tell them I just have been like, my aunt is a podcaster, and then they're always like, someone I know? Do I know them? Yeah, usually they don't. But yeah, they're like, wow, they think it's kind of crazy. So,
do you think you'll share these episodes with them when they come out?
oh yeah,
Really
they want to
cool.
hear them.
Wow. Do most of them
Yeah.
share your worldview? Are that most of them like in line with what you believe about the world?
Probably, yeah, more so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any Christian friends that are like, "Oh, that's really cool"?
Not that I've told, I don't think.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I'm excited. Way to go,
Yeah.
Noelle. Way to go. Way to advocate your own worldview, but also be willing to hear other things. What did you think of our conversation last week with Xandra?
It was very like interesting and rich and like lots of good topics. It's a very like there's so much to talk about. So it's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like having these conversations is challenging your perspective of Christians a little bit, or is it still like, yeah, most of them are probably haters?
It's been a really cool learning experience. And I'm seeing a lot of points of view that I was kind of unaware of. And kind of like, yeah, just didn't really realize. And it's definitely made me think about my values and like what I do believe and what's important to me. Yeah, it's great. It's got me thinking. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Was it last conversation that we had where you were like, yeah, the truth is I don't really want to believe in a God where it's like that, where his followers are like that. You kind of said
Yeah.
something along those lines. Yeah. Did that feel like an eye-opening statement for you that you didn't realize was true about where you're at right now, or?
Probably. Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, it is eye-opening, and yeah, I don't know that I've necessarily like changed my
Sure.
opinion, but it's cool to hear and to learn and to
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah. Well, I love your attitude about being here and how open you are and how honest you
Yeah.
are. So I'm just excited that you get to have this kind of conversation, that I get to have this conversation with you, and then we get to bring people on to have conversations like this. And last week, when Xandra opened up about her past with the heavy metal rock band or whatever it was, and you were like so like thrilled that that was part of her past, I was like, oh, there's something happening here. I think we need to have her back. There's like a kindred spirit moment happening. So anyway, I had to ask Xandra, would you come back? Xandra, I'm so glad you did. For those of whoever's listening or watching that didn't get to hear you last time, would you share briefly about who you are and about the ministry that you're currently a part of?
Yeah, I'm Xandra Grieme, and I work for the Museum of Created Beauty, which is a digital museum that showcases the most beautiful discoveries in science. And there's sort of 3 different hallways you can go down to explore, from the macrocosm, which is, galaxies and planets out there, to the midicosm, which is what you see with your own eyes, trees, bugs, seahorses, to the microcosm, which is anything you see in a microscope. So pollen, snowflakes, things like that. So it's a fun job. I enjoy it. And other than that, I'm just out here in Colorado. Went for a long run in the snow this morning. So I'm really feeling like a Coloradan today. But I'm so happy to be back on the podcast. So thank you guys for having me back on.
Thank you for coming back on. Now, if people want to find more, want to find out more about you after this conversation, how do they find the Museum of Created Beauty?
Yeah. Thanks for letting me plug that, Janelle. They can go to museumofcreatedbeauty.org, all one word. And they can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Instagram's the most fun though. That's where we have lots of cool, weird creatures. And yeah, if you're a biology nerd, definitely check out the Instagram page for the Museum of Created Beauty.
That's awesome. I need to go follow them because I haven't done that yet. I love looking at cool stuff like that. I follow some accounts on Instagram where they showcase birds. And I just shared something today, and it was these birds flying in motion over Italy. And they were like, the music that they were playing was like opera music. Did you see this, Noelle? Did you see my stories? And they're like doing this dance, and it's crazy like, what's the biological explanation for
Is
that?
that, I think you may have seen the murmuration of
Yes.
starlings. Does that
Yes.
sound right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm
What is
guessing
this?
if you saw that it was in Italy and it was a lot of birds moving together, I'm guessing they were starlings.
Yeah.
It's a little bit mysterious. It usually happens in the cool of the day. So, oftentimes it happens at dusk, just as the sun is going down when it's cooler. They're not feeding, they're not courting, they're just murmurating. They're just making this incredible dance through the sky. And, biologists have for a long time wondered exactly what it is that's happening, but it is quite beautiful. It's kind of like how humpback whales will get together and hang upside down in the ocean and sing for hours. We're not exactly sure why they all get together and sing. Some people have posited this, that, or the other thing, but it's kind of one of those beautiful, mysterious things. And maybe someday we'll know why, but as of now, we're still trying to figure it out.
Wow. Yeah, we had a guy come to our church years ago, a different church, and he was really into science. And he gave this whole presentation about birds and their like migration to I do not know the science or the scientific terms behind this. I'm going to sound like such an ignorant person, which I am when it comes to science. That is not my forte. But anyway, how they migrate from one location to an exact other location every year. And he was talking about how that's been part of their created beauty, their design, that there's no explanation for it via evolution, that they always go to the exact same spot and they know. Do you know what I'm talking about, or am I just making stuff up?
No, you're not making it up. There are so many migratory birds that I'm not sure which one you're talking about. Sometimes they'll go to a specific breeding ground or a specific feeding ground where there's a great source of food that correlates at the exact same time. Maybe a certain species of aquatic fish or a bug or something is hatching in this water at this time that the birds fly over. But yeah, some of it is a complete mystery. So I'd be curious to know which one you had read about or heard from your friend about.
It was the way he shared about it. It was like, how could that happen from a survival of the fittest kind of thing? Because I don't know where'd the memory come from. Why are they always going to the same place? It was just crazy. Noelle, do you know? Like from a biological standpoint, how people explain that?
No. Yeah.
I know.
Not
It was
sure.
crazy. I don't know.
Yeah.
We bought his videos. I should go look and see if I can know more about what I'm talking about. But it was so cool. It was a really cool apologetic argument, and I don't remember all the details, but I remember thinking, that is crazy. I can't even imagine. And butterflies do something very similar, don't they? Yeah.
Yeah, some species of butterfly. I know that monarchs are the one that's most commonly cited. I mean, they fly for thousands of miles. And there's also this really cool moth called the bogong moth in Australia that makes the largest flight of any lepidopteran, as far as I'm aware. A lepidopteran is like a moth or a butterfly or a skipper, that kind of animal. And it is very mysterious. How do they follow the exact same flight path every time when it's the first time that they've ever made that journey as a new hatchling? And yet they know exactly where to go. It's the same exact path every time. And they've done all these tests. Are they using the moon? Are they somehow tapping into the magnetosphere around our planet and using some sort of magnetic receptor in their brain to figure out where they're going? These teeny tiny little creatures that make this 1,000-mile long journey that is so precise every single time. Maybe, epigenetics are in play in some fashion, but it's just part of this whole big, beautiful, intricate dance on planet Earth that's constantly happening in this little 12-mile thick layer around the surface. That's where life occurs, only within 12 miles, top and bottom, from like the sea to the sky. And it's just like everywhere you go, life is just dancing and beautiful. And yeah, it's so cool. That's why I love being a biologist. There's so much to learn. There's so much that we don't know.
Yeah. I can't remember if I mentioned this last week, but I've been slowly, I read a lot of books and then I put them away and then I'll read them like a year later or something like this. And I was actually listening to Eric Metaxas's book on atheism being dead or something like this. Is Atheism Dead? I think is the title of the book. And he was just citing all this research that had been done by all these different scientists. And it was just fascinating. And he at one point does this whole like visual of what the chances would have to be for the earth to even exist the way that it does. And again, it would help to remember and recall these details, but it was like one dime in like the height of the Empire State Building across the entire world, deep, and one dime being one color and finding that one, like, it was just crazy. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think what you're talking about might fall into what's more broadly known as the fine-tuning argument.
Okay, would you share that?
Yeah. So you're doing great, Janelle. Give yourself some credit. You're doing awesome. I'm very impressed.
Oh, good. Thanks.
just pulling out those facts about
Oh,
dimes and
there you
whatnot.
go. You know what? Shout out to my
Butterflies.
friend. Do you know Eric Hernandez? Are you friends with him?
Oh, I've met him before.
Yeah.
One time. I'm not friends with him. I would like to be, but
Oh
I've met
yeah.
him once.
He's on the podcast. We work with for Maven together. And he's so funny. Eric, if you ever listen to this is a true story. He's told me, he goes, make sure you call yourself an apologist, right? You are. You need to. And so I started being like, oh yeah, I do apologetics, whatever. But then when I pull out stuff like this, I'm like, like really?
You can be an apologist and not be able to speak science in the dusty, boring way that some people do.
Okay.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. You don't need to. You're doing great.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay,
Anyway,
you go ahead.
Yep. A question about, what were you asking
Fine
me?
tuning.
Oh, you're asking me about the fine tuning argument. Yep. Right. So the fine tuning argument more broadly. Noelle, have you heard of this by chance?
I haven't. I'm very
really
intrigued.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
So it basically argues that when we look at the statistical data around cosmology, the way that the universe was formed, the way our planet was formed, et cetera, when we look at all of these factors, there's a very strong, I wouldn't say proof. It doesn't prove anything. But statistically speaking, it's impossible to argue that it happened by accident because the precision is so high. In the same way that you might observe an orchestra, for example, and I don't know how many instruments are in an orchestra, but you've got, the wind instruments, the brass, you've got the strings, percussion, and all of these, each of these instruments has to be tuned perfectly. So that it's melodious, so that it sounds proper. And then it has to play in tandem perfectly with those around it. So it's not atonal, it's not asynchronous, it's all harmonizing, and it's at the right tempo. Does that make sense? And that's what creates the larger product of all these things weaving together that we call music, right? So that's what comes out of this symphony. And in the same way, when you look at the various facets of the universe, what's been created, you can see how everything has been fine-tuned like, an instrument or something like that. And it's playing perfectly along with everything else in harmony and in tandem. But the statistical odds around this are kind of preposterous. For example, you're a biologist, so let's just talk about life existing on this planet. What are the odds of life existing on this planet? And many mathematicians, many cosmologists, astronomers, etc., have done a ton of work on this to try and analyze what's the statistical odds that this would happen. And the current number is 1 in 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 120 something. I can't remember the exact number, but that number is preposterous. Basically, if you were to take all the matter in the universe and turn it into like 8 by 11 sheets of paper and try and write the number out on both sides of that paper, it wouldn't be enough paper to actually give you the odds of that. It's so finely tuned. So, it is really incredible. And we can talk about just the fine tuning of our solar system and how Jupiter is positioned exactly where it needs to be to, pull things away from Earth, because the sun is huge. The sun is massive. It's, of course, the biggest thing in our solar system being a star. And so all the stuff gunk that's just flying through the Milky Way, this particular arm of the Milky Way, which is our home galaxy, is going to want to go into our sun. And Jupiter is like our guardian. He's the one that protects our little tiny, teeny, tiny planet Earth. And if he wasn't there, we'd be bombarded so much we wouldn't even have an atmosphere and we wouldn't have life, right? Or just how far away are we from the sun as a planet? If you were to move us just a tiny bit towards the sun, we would be too hot, right? So all of our atmosphere, all of our water would be atmosphere, and we would look like Venus. But if you were to move us just a tiny bit away from the sun, we would be too cold, and all of our water would be locked up in ice and we would look like Mars. So it's really interesting to me that we have a similar planet on either side of us that kind of shows us what we would look like if we were a little closer, a little further away from the sun. And it shows us that we are truly in the habitable zone, as they call it. The habitable zone is where you can have liquid water in a system, and it's potentially a home for life in that case. Or even how like our solar system is flip-flopped in how it's made, because normally when you look through the stuff that the Kepler mission has discovered or something like that, a lot of these other systems that we've found have a sun in the middle that's a lot different from our sun. I mean, our sun is very stable and on the younger side. And then all the gas giants are in the middle because of gravity, right? And all the little guys are on the outside. But in our solar system, it's flopped. Like the gas giants are on the outside and the little ones are on the inside. And that's interesting how like it creates a shield that protects us. So anyway, I could go on and on, obviously. Sorry, that was just a lot of information, but that's one example of the fine-tuning argument. And it's just really incredible to look at a lot of this stuff. And a lot of cosmologists have started their journey towards God by just looking at the data and going away and thinking, how is this possibly an accident? Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Like yeah. That is just like so, it's so much to think about. Like, it's crazy the way we just like connect, and like the way things are and like naturally exist. Like, we're all able to, that's just nuts. Yeah. And that's so fair to believe that it wasn't an accident, because how could that happen? For real.
Yeah.
Yeah, going back to that Eric Metaxas stuff, it all started, he had written an article that said science increasingly gives evidence for God, I think is what it was called. Xandra, you might recall the article, but it went viral like maybe 15 years ago or something. I don't know. We'll link it in the show notes. I think it was for Newsweek or maybe Time Magazine. And it was just fascinating because he gave like the number of zeros that it would have to be, in this percentage of, how is it possible that time, space, matter all came into existence at exactly the same time? Like, what is that? And then when I was listening to his audiobook about Is Atheism Dead? I was on this, driving down to Oregon. So it was like a 5-hour drive from here. And at one point, and it's just tons of data. And like I said, I am not a scientific person. So sometimes my eyes glaze over when I'm listening to science. But he's sharing all of this and he's talking about water. And when he started talking about what is water, how is it like, how does it even work, that it's a miracle that it even exists? And I never heard this before about water. You probably know what I'm talking about. I didn't know. And I just started tearing up because I thought, oh my gosh, God, like how you've provided for us in ways we don't even acknowledge, I mean, scripture says that if you don't praise me, the rocks will cry out. And when you see like things like those birds dancing in the sky and the monarch butterflies going down, like it's just like it's all around us. I mean, if I could just pay attention long enough, but I don't pay attention very often. Do you know anything about water, Xandra? I'm curious.
Water is really interesting. I mean, we take it for granted because we're like, more than 70% water. Just our bodies are full of water, like everywhere, we're just water's everywhere. But it's a really fascinating molecule. And I mean, even just if you consider the surface tension of water, it's so crazy. I saw this video the other day of a really slow motion, a tiny water droplet going into like a pool, and it was showing how the surface tension doesn't allow a water droplet to go in easily. And we can't see this with the naked eye, but it like bounces like a bouncy ball. And then another more will go in, and then a smaller one will bounce like a smaller bouncy ball. And it just keeps going because of that surface tension. So yeah, I mean, water is a really incredible molecule. The properties of it are fascinating. And again, it's something we take for granted because we're mostly water. Yeah. And we haven't really been able to find it anywhere else. We've certainly found frozen water on Mars, and some striations that would suggest that at one point there could have been liquid water on the surface, and certainly deep canyons such as Valles Marineris on Mars could have been created by running water, but we're really not sure. So yeah.
Wow. It's crazy. The more you learn about science, the more I'm like, whoa, this is. I don't know if I asked you this last week, Noelle. Maybe you remember if I asked her this, but why do you think so many people can look at the exact same data, the exact same like incredible vastness of this world, and go, that happened by accident? Or there's no way that happened by accident. I mean, I heard Richard Dawkins even say, famous atheist, if there was an argument for God's existence that I would have to say is probably what would sway someone like me, it's the fine-tuning argument. Even he concedes that that's something that's really hard to go, yeah, there's no God. But why do so many people, do you think, resist, searching for who God is?
It's a really good question, and it reminds me of something Werner Heisenberg said. He's an amazing scientific mind, as we all know, but Werner Heisenberg famously said that the first sip from the glass of natural sciences will turn you into an atheist, but at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you. And I've always been really moved by that quote, because it's a little bit my story, and a lot of people's stories that I know. Some of the greatest scientific minds who believe in God will say that science brought them to God, not that they believe in science despite their belief in God. And that's really encouraging for someone like me to hear, who's a Christian, who's really interested in the sciences and wants to encourage other young people that you can believe in God and love science. Science is a beautiful thing, and it's a gift, and it should be pursued and appreciated and all of that. As to your question about exactly why, I wonder if it isn't so much about science. Because, one year you can have the Nobel Prize for physics that's awarded to an atheist man, and another year you can have the Nobel Prize for physics awarded to a Christian woman. And like, what's the difference? What was causing the difference? Well, I don't think it was their science that was in conflict. I think it was their worldview that was in conflict. And one of them didn't believe that God existed, and the other one did believe that God existed. So I don't think that it's ever been between science and faith. I think it's always been between atheism and theism. And clearly those two things are opposites. One of them is not believing in God, and one of them is believing in God. It's just portrayed as being a scientific thing. And I wonder if people use it the way that I did at one time, where they hide behind science like a shield, where they'll say, like, put up a wall almost and say, well, I'm an intelligent person. I'm a rational person. I believe in reason. I believe in logic, and therefore I don't need any kind of fairy tale to make me feel better. I hear a lot of people say something like that. And I think it's a bit of a straw man argument. Now, there are some people out there who do believe in God because it makes them feel good. But that's not actual faith. That's what we call blind faith. That's just believing in something because of what it does for you or how it makes you feel. Right. It's not real at all. But then there's rational faith, which is the faith that's described in the Bible, which is when you trust something enough that you put your stock in it. And certainly you will have to have reasons for believing that it is true. Now, will you be convinced 100% beyond a shadow of a doubt? Of course not. You're not convinced of anything beyond a shadow of a doubt. I'm not convinced the sun will rise tomorrow, even though I've seen it rise every morning for my entire life, but I can't prove that it will rise tomorrow. And so I think, there are a lot of people who, if faith is a chair, they might say, well, I'm a scientist, so I'm going to analyze this and I'm going to see what it's made of, what the dimensions are, what kind of varnish was put on it. And they'll throw all kinds of, science at it and measure it and whatever. And they'll say, now I understand the chair and now I don't need that. And there are other people who come to the chair and they look at it and they analyze it and they know that it can hold them. And they say, yes, I'm ready for a rest. And they sit down in the chair, and that's trust and that's faith. Now they have reasons for believing in it. And so I do think there are a lot of people who they look at the fine-tuning argument, they're convinced by it. It's very compelling, but they still decide not to believe because it's not something that they want. A lot of people don't want to believe in God, or they feel afraid of him. They feel like if they concede to the fact that he exists, he's going to take something from them or demand things from them that they don't want to give up. And it's a very frightening thing for a lot of people. I think people don't always realize what a loving God he is, and that he's so eager to forgive, that he's the God of reconciliation, which is why the Bible calls him time and time again the Good Shepherd. So you can throw all the data you want at someone and it's not going to convince them to believe. At the end of the day, I think oftentimes it's a heart issue.
Yeah. Yeah. Noelle, any thoughts on that?
Wow. That was just such an insightful and smart thing to say. I just yeah. And I kind of relate to that. I really facts are important to me, and tangible, actual things that I can see or hear, feel, or touch. Just oh gosh, I lost my train of thought. And I understand the feeling of wanting to reject God because you might have to give up things about yourself. And that's kind of something personal to me. I feel like I can't. Hold on. like, I don't know. I can't be true to myself and also believe in something that is abstract and I'm very unsure about it. There's a lot of differing opinions on it, a lot of different religions, and reasons for why we are here on this earth. And yeah, it's great to believe in God, yeah, if that helps you, and it certainly does help a lot of people. And yeah, I guess everyone gets something out of being a Christian and being faithful and going to church. There is some kind of there's a reason you do it. And yeah, if that works for you, that's awesome. That's great. And yeah, I don't know, that was very all over the place. But yeah, I don't know how to articulate what I'm trying to say. I just don't know.
Okay. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So you just mentioned that you wouldn't feel true to yourself if you believed in something kind of abstract or intangible. Mm-hmm. What was in your mind when you said that, or what's kind of that abstract thing?
Yeah, it goes along with, I guess, all of what I've been told and been taught about God and religion, and that he hates gay people or just people like me, or like it's just, that is my identity. And to like, even if that's not true, it's just the misinformation, I think, or just like the amount of information, and what is real and what is not, even within the Christian religion. And like, I don't know, I really, really like what you said about like, yeah, like the fine tuning argument, and like how this amazing masterpiece of a planet, we just like, it's perfect for us. Like, it's perfect for us. And that's so crazy that that could even happen. But to me, that still doesn't really prove a creator, I guess. And I'm not trying to not sit in the chair, but I don't know that I'm gonna take a seat. And that's just because I just don't know. And I don't think anyone really does. And if faith is something that gets you through the day, and like gets you through life, and gives you an explanation for why you're here and why you're doing this, why are any of us here, I think that's great. But I also think that it's okay that some people don't believe that. And I think it's all right. And not everyone has to be a Christian to be a good person, or to be like, I don't know, yeah, just, yeah, like, to be right, I guess. Yeah, so there's lots there's lots of stuff within that. I'm not having a like a bad communication day, but like,
No,
I
you're
hope
doing
you
great.
understand what I'm trying to say.
No, yeah,
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
you're articulating yourself well. And if I hear you correctly, it sounds like, some of the things that we've talked about are kind of compelling, but those things don't necessitate a creator. There could be another reason. And also, one of the main things it seems like that's in your heart right now, as you think about Christianity in particular, is this feeling that you'd be untrue to yourself, not just because you were believing in something you weren't sure was real, but because it would be directly going against who you are as a person and your community. And that feels like a contradiction, Is that what you were trying to say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
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 I mean, that's a really valid point. Why would you want to not just, believe in a religion, but actually we're talking about believing in a person. That's what we're talking about. Why would you want to be with Jesus and follow him if he is actively against who you are as a person, or hates you, as you said? Does God hate gays? And I think that might be more at the heart of your question than the science stuff. Is that,
Yeah.
would you say that's accurate? Okay.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I do have some sciencey stuff, but yeah, that is like a really, really big thing for me. Yeah, very, very personal to me. And
Totally.
I just like will not associate myself with people who are gonna hate me for who I love. I just won't. and yeah, it's, I guess, part of the reason why I don't believe in God, but not all of it. it's very complex.
Yeah.
And stuff that I'm actively working through. I'm young. I don't have all the answers. And maybe I'll change my mind. Who knows? But right now, agnostic feels right. I'm not sure. And that's what I kind of like about, I guess, the label of that, of being agnostic versus atheist. Because, like, from what I know, I feel like atheism is more like, there is no God, I'm sure of it.
Yeah.
And I am not sure. I have no idea. And that's kind of what agnosticism is just, we don't know. Could be anything. Who knows? Who's to say? And I kind of more identify with that, and like the we don't know, and we probably shouldn't just assume and then say it as fact. So
yeah, that would not have intellectual integrity at all, to assume that something is true and say that it's fact if you don't know that it's true. Thank you for sharing that. Thanks for letting me ask you a couple of questions. Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
Sorry, Janelle. I know
That's
this
right.
is your podcast, so I'm just really
Go
curious.
Go ahead.
If, and this is totally hypothetical, so just go with me here, but if you were somehow to discover that Jesus loved you and that Jesus loved your friends, would that change at all what you're thinking and feeling right now?
I'm not sure. Because we've done some other episodes, and I don't remember which one it was, but someone was talking about how, like, yeah, God loves everyone and has this just unconditional love for all of us, which is great, and it's good to hear. I think it's just the humans, and the environment and the attitude, that really turns me away from it. Yeah. And, like, I've been told, yeah, Jesus loves you, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. But just to, like, hear from Christians that what I'm doing is an abomination and I deserve to go to hell. Like, I don't know, I guess they just ruined it for me, maybe. Yeah.
I'm really sorry that people told you were an abomination. And that's certainly not a loving approach.
Yeah, not gonna get me to join your church.
Yeah,
not gonna get me to turn straight by yelling at me. That's for sure.
My husband had a really similar situation. My husband is the only Christian in his family, and when he was a little kid, his family moved to Georgia, which is like Bible Belt of the USA, right? And there's churches everywhere, and every school that he went to, he and his sister got really picked on because they were the only kids who didn't go to church. And as he started learning about Jesus, he thought, wow, this Jesus person sounds really interesting and like a loving person, but I don't want to go to church because I don't want to be around Christians. So for the longest time, he didn't go to church. But that's another story. I hear what you're saying. I just want to say I can hear what you're saying, and you sound totally reasonable. Why would you want to hang out in a building full of people who hate you? I wouldn't want to hang out in a building full of people who hate me. And I know that you've had some really bad experiences with Christians, and I am just one Christian. But yeah. I want to tell you that I don't hate you. I think that you're a wonderful person, and there are a lot of people out there who I don't think would hate you either. A lot of them have quieter voices than the haters, sadly. So sometimes they aren't heard as easily. But I would like you to keep an open heart to those of us who do love you. And yeah, I'm really sorry for what some people in my home have done. That breaks my heart too. So
Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean it.
And
Thank you.
I just want to say, Noelle, I mean, you know I don't hate you, right? I hope. That you're here because I love you and I care about you. Yeah? Yes?
Yeah.
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 And I'm thinking of other Christians that I know, like your grandma who took you to church all grown up. Pretty sure she loves you. Yes? Yeah.
Yeah.
Your grandpa. Now, if you could have a political discussion with them without it getting heated, I don't know. But did they love you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
sometimes we can have, and I don't know how many negative experiences you've had with people, but sometimes we can see things in our social media feeds, or we have one like horrible experience and it's like that becomes the narrative, right? But
Yeah.
I also know that there's people in your life who say that they love Jesus, who love you very much. That said, Xandra, I loved what you shared. Xandra, as sinners and as Christians, we do believe we're screwed up and we do deserve hell, right? Like that's a belief that you and I hold. Why are you not an agnostic? And how can you love somebody well when you can also say, yeah, there's things that we do that separate us from this loving God?
Yeah, I mean, and again, I know that you might not, believe in sin, Noelle, but a key belief in the Christian worldview is that we aren't perfect, that nobody is perfect, and that God is. The whole Christian story starts with the fact that there is a God who is perfect. He's like the epitome of beauty and goodness and truth. And and so because he wants to be with us, he wants to fix us. And that's not a very appealing story for people to hear, that, that you're born messed up. But it is kind of clear that we are born messed up. I mean, even by the time we're 1 year old or 2 years old, we're stealing things from our brother, we're crying, we're biting, whatever. Some of us are worse than others. I was
Noelle was
perfect
really
angel,
sweet.
and my brother wasn't. No, I'm kidding. Noelle, I'm sure you never cried as a baby.
Not
I'm sure
once.
you never threw a tantrum.
No, not me.
But again, we talked about this last time a little bit. It's like how you're familiar with the story of Adam and Eve in the garden, and how God gave them certain parameters to say, this is what love looks like. This is what our relationship looks like. You can go here, but you can't go over here. This is not for you. It's just for me. And they broke the rule and ate the forbidden fruit, which wasn't at all about fruit. And everything about that was rebelling against the one who loved them and wanted to keep them close to his heart. And that's when sin entered. And it was like, as that fruit was consumed and swallowed and taken in, it was almost like a virus went into humanity, and we've all been born with this inside of our DNA from then on. So it's like sin is often understood as something you do externally, like, oh, you lie, you cheat, you steal, whatever. And that's true. But there's another part of sin that a lot of people don't understand, who haven't, read the Bible, which is that it's something you're born with. Like the Bible says in the Psalms, I was conceived a sinner. In my mother's womb, I was a sinner. So how can you be a sinner if you've never even done anything wrong yet, right? And that's what it means. And I think we get confused because we see one person might point at another person and say, you're a sinner. Well, actually, like, if you're a human being, you were conceived in sin and born in sin. And so there's no reason to hate someone else or judge someone else for not being perfect, because none of us are perfect, and Jesus said, I came to heal the sick. I didn't come for the people who thought they were perfect. And he is the antivirus. Jesus is the one who, when you invite him into yourself, when you take him into yourself, he describes himself as the bread of life. It's almost like you take a piece of this bread and you swallow it down, and it undoes everything that was there before. And so that's a little bit of how, I don't know if that makes sense at all, but that, the forgiveness of Christ is like, you need to be with me and I need to be with you. And the description in the book of John is, I abide in you and you abide in me. And there's this really cool word for that in Latin called perichoresis, which means the mutual piercing of hearts. And so it's like Jesus's heart comes into your heart and your heart goes into Jesus's heart, like simultaneously, like they become one thing. And that's what happens when we have become reborn, basically, and become unbroken. So Janelle, I don't know if that answered your question, but it's very easy to love someone who, isn't perfect, because none of us are perfect. There's no reason to. And also, can I just say one other thing? Sorry. There's no reason for me as a Christian to assume that someone who is not a Christian is going to live their life like they are a Christian. Did you follow what I said there? Like, for example, one of my best friends in college was this Muslim girl. Her name was Hannah, and we hung out all the time. And Hannah was raised Muslim. She knew the Quran backwards and forwards. She had studied the hadiths and the way of Muhammad and all of this. And she knew how you're supposed to live your life as a Muslim. And there are specific rules that you follow and things that you do. You never touch someone with your left hand, etc. But she knew that I wasn't Muslim. I didn't know the Quran. I didn't know anything. I wasn't on that path. So if we're hanging out having lunch and I accidentally reach across the table and I just give her a pat on the shoulder with my left hand, I mean, that's an abomination to Muslims, right? But she would never, if I made a mistake like that or something, she never judged me. She was never angry at me because she knew I wasn't on the same path. I hadn't committed myself to living my life as a Muslim. That's why I didn't cover my head. I didn't know all of these things. And so it's interesting to me why sometimes Christian people will assume that everyone around them needs to act like a Christian, and they'll come down on them really hard if they don't follow, for example, the sexual ethic laid out by Jesus, which, by the way, is a very difficult sexual ethic to follow, which is why when Jesus' own disciples asked him to explain, his way and his sexual ethic, and he explained it, their response was, really? Well, maybe it's better not to marry then, because it's very difficult. It's really difficult to wait until marriage to have sex. I mean, my husband and I, because we're Christian, we chose to walk that path. And all of our friends thought we were crazy. Like, a lot of our friends were like, you literally haven't had sex yet? You're literally waiting until you marry to have sex? We got married at 36, by the way. Like, we're not young people. So that's a long time to wait. But we decided to do it that way because we wanted to follow Jesus' ethic and Jesus' way that he laid out. But I'm not going to expect my other friends who don't believe in him to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So going back to that question, to Noelle's point, how can you ever know for sure? Why not just be an agnostic?
How can you know that Jesus is real?
Yeah, like, Xandra, what made you decide, I'm going to commit my life to this Jesus who's going to mess with my own identity, my own perception of my identity. It was going to mess with my, hard rocking lifestyle, whatever you were doing, like he's not going to leave me alone. Clearly. I mean, you can see that throughout history when Jesus comes in, pierces your heart, you pierce his, like there's something that happens to the lives of people who walk with him. And you do change, like you just shared, waiting until you were 36. That was out of love for Jesus, right? Why allow him access like that? Why allow Jesus Christ to mess with your life instead of going, I could never know for sure, so I'm choosing the agnostic route?
Well, a couple of reasons. One of them won't make sense, and one of them might make more sense. He's worth it. He's worth it is my first reason. And you can't know that until you know him. And that's a long process, but you have to try. I mean, if it's true that there is a God who offers what he says he's offering, eternal life with him, where there's no more suffering, no more pain, no more tears, that's at least worth investigating whether or not there are rational reasons for believing in that. And then you have to decide from there, okay, I know this is true, but am I going to decide to commit yes or no? And that's something that will happen later down the road for you, Noelle, I'm sure, as you continue talking with people and looking into this stuff. But the second reason, which is a little more self-applicable, is I wanted to know who I was. And G.K. Chesterton, the author, famously said that we are all lost from ourselves, more distant than any star. And it's hard for us to know who we are as people. Who am I supposed to be? What's my identity? And Jesus said, your identity is hidden in me. So if you want to know who you are, come find out. And that invitation has been my life story of trying to find who I was, where I fit, what I was supposed to do, who I was supposed to be, what I was supposed to look like, sound like, whatever. And never feeling like I knew who I was, really. And Jesus, it's not about Jesus making you feel good. It's about Jesus showing you who you are and remaking you in the way you were always supposed to be. Because if we're all born broken violins, we can't put ourselves back together. Who but the violin maker knows how to put the strings on and tune you so that you can sing like you were supposed to sing. And that's why I believe in him and I follow him. And yes, there's a cost. I'm not going to pretend that there's not a cost. A lot of people don't follow Jesus even after they realize he's real and he's God. And the reason is they think, I don't want that. That sounds too hard. But he is so worth it. And I have never, ever regretted following him since I turned back to him and started following him. And I've seen some crazy things. I've had some hard experiences. I think I can honestly say that I have suffered for the gospel. I have suffered for the sake of the gospel. And there are lots of stories that I could tell you that I won't tell you here because this podcast will be broadcasted. But he is absolutely worth it. And those are just words to your ears, but that's my honest reason from my heart.
I love that. Yes.
Xandra, thank you for coming back here today. Normally, I always ask the same final question, but I just asked it of you a week ago, so I feel like it would be a little repetitive if I asked it again. But
what if I asked you that question, Janelle, to close?
Okay.
Wait, let's see if I can remember them.
Okay.
Okay. Reality?
Restoration.
No, redemption.
Restoration.
I'm doing great. Great start. Wow. Eternity. Authenticity. Love.
Yeah. Which stands out to you the most in your life right now and why?
Tell us, Janelle.
Yeah. I think authenticity, based on this conversation, probably. We don't know who we really are until we know who the author is, And even that word authenticity comes from that. we say, oh, I want to hold on to my identity, what Noelle just shared, like, gosh, I can relate to that. He's going to take it away. And then we're holding on to something. In fact, speaking of C.S. Lewis, he has that great story analogy. You probably know exactly what I'm talking about, where he's talking about we're children playing in a mud puddle when we could look at the ocean. We hold on to these things that we think are who we are. And we're stuck in our garbage and our, the stuff that goes through our heads, when reality is when we just turn towards him, we can see the ocean. We can see so much more. And yeah, I feel the same way. Like, yeah, does following Jesus cost everything? Yeah. As he said, right? Follow me. But you're going to turn from all these other things. But when you choose to do that, you find the ocean and you go, man, like, how could I not share this with people? Noelle, in our very first conversation, she's like, why do Christians feel the need to, convert people like me or talk to people like me? It's like, once you've experienced the ocean, how could you not share that with people? Once you've experienced restoration, eternity, authenticity, and love. But yeah, I think there's this great song that I'm listening to right now. It talks about letting go and letting God. And it's just, kind of a fun workout, song. But there's this great line where it's talking about, I'm learning to let go and let God. Show me how to be free. I'm learning how to let go and let God. Show me how to be me. And when we look to him, that's when we find out who we were designed to be. Anyway, that's my answer. I'm sticking to it. Thank you so much, Xandra Grieme. And for Noelle, this won't be the last conversation we have, I'm sure. Maybe we can continue a little bit of a conversation here once we're off the air, but I love it. Until next time.